this is a general thing where I sort of ponder, the kind of things that I want answers to, and I want to figure out how they work and whether they are progressive or whether they will be progressive. Now, it seems to me, uh, I've always argued against the red line. This is the Mururani, the Oshivelo, and the one in the rural areas at the Ramulan, that gate there, which is used basically for animal control, supposedly. But the infrastructure was not built by Namibia, and it wasn't really erected um, because of keeping animals uh, that have diseases or whatever away. Because if anything, the north would have been the most profitable, most efficient, effective place where they could have, where they could have had livestock and grow crops, farmers, whatever. Unlike here in the side, in the central and the south, where it's a bit drier than it is that side. Um, so when you cross Murulani, when you cross the border, obviously you're met by a veterinarian, and there'll be soldiers around if your car needs to be checked or whatever. Um, but what I don't get about it still being there um, is why doesn't it act as a roadblock as opposed to the extent and the mandate that it has been given, which hasn't really changed. And I believe that this mandate of that line remaining there is the one that keeps the north, especially the rural north, um, it keeps them sort of locked away from life in other towns, in the city and so forth. This is easy to spot when someone comes from the village to go and study at Polytech, UNAM, or the other college institutions and so forth. The first thing they do is marvel at the buildings and how many people are walking around and so forth and so forth. Um, and most of all, uh, they marvel at the access that they end up having. Um, these could be phones that can connect to the internet. This could be tablets. This could be um, computers at the libraries of these institutions, which connects them to a broader world. Shows them like there is another world out there. Alright. So with that line, the government's responsibility toward the people in the rural areas is restricted because um, I think the ones that hold power over that land are the so-called kings and chiefs. I read someone called them landlords, and that's true. Alright, so you have people um, that have had land, their own piece, for years. They walked on it, they plowed on it, and I'm talking about plowing with cows, not with tractors. When they had to clear the area, sometimes if the axe isn't enough, they would sort of burn the tree and then hit the coal so that it gets out of the way. So there's a lot of hard labor done there, and it's very dark. it's around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, it already feels like it's 10 o'clock because the villages are not lit. They are not lit, right? They are not lit. If you want your home to be lit, then you have to pay um, the contractor, whoever that may be. Um, for the past couple of years, it's been lowered. You have to pay them, and they will give you the transformer, which is the one that will generate the electricity. They will give it to you not at the value, depending on the circumstance or situation where you are, but they will give you the value that they would. Um, let's say if it was government covering for this, right? And what they don't do, and what people do there, is some folks I noticed a transformer, and they lend other people electricity, and then the people pay them back. Um, so that's what's going on. So the transformers themselves are very, very ancient and sort of um, non-progressive, right? You find transformers like a transformer that it's huge, and okay, it was like when I was in Safari, just I am still from Safari anyway. Just four houses to the north of our house, um, next to one of those houses, was this huge transformer. It was green, right? You could hear it. That right, and we used to go there, climb there, yada yada yada. But what it did was it provided the people um, in those in that block or in that street or whatever with electricity, right? With electricity that is in their control and not the control of, say, um, an individual. And the thing, and they didn't even have to uh, bring out the money to buy this transformer. It was put there because there were homes, and so they put them there. Now in the village, as you can see, people are breaking their necks, their backs, selling whatever they can to try and save up to buy transformers because they want power. I think people really underestimate the um, the um, the importance of power. We can go back to Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Now, everybody knows Thomas Edison preferred the direct current, and this led to a lot of wires everywhere, and it would lead to an individual wire that goes to one homestead, um, to give them power, or one apartment block to give them power, and it was very inefficient, and it was just messy, right? And then Nikola Tesla came up with alternating current, which is not as dangerous because there isn't a lot of electricity running through it, um, and it was much more versatile, much more flexible in terms of distributing now power to people, and it was much much cheaper, right? He didn't patent it. I don't know who did, but they're the ones that got rich. But the point I'm trying to strike here is when people blew out their candles and they turned on their lights, it was amazing for them. You could have kids um, that could study if they wanted um, at night. I'm not saying they shouldn't have studied in the day. They do in the day, but they can revise in the night before bed, to keep it fresh, right? Now, the only way that people in most of our rural areas can get access to power is number one, buying that transformer for 60, $50,000 or whatever. And most people buy it on credit. They go to the banks and they loan the money and they end up buying these transformers because they want electricity in their houses too. Because electricity or power is also in the modern world. Let's not forget this is the 21st century, alright? It's also a form of dignity, a form of belonging. When people travel from the village to say go do shopping in Rundu, there are lights everywhere, the computer monitors are on, yada yada yada, there's power. But when they go back, it's dark, right? And that's why you will end up getting labeled a villager and all of that stuff. Like me, I'm a proud villager. I'm a proud villager. Even though I didn't go there as often as I could, uh, this year and next year, I want to dedicate all of my time to the rural areas, um, especially to see how the people, right, how the people put down their grievance uh, when they speak to the chief or the king. You understand? Those are the people that are in charge of of everything. If you want to do what, you have to go to them and ask for permission. So you have never heard of a village strike. Never has anyone heard of a village strike. There is there has only been one, which was a the liberation struggle. Let's be honest. Most of these people came from villages. They came from informal settlements and so forth. Uh, so to leave those people in the dark, to me personally, is a crime. There are transformers, right, that you can place at each base station, right, and they interlink using alternating current or whatever. And what they would do is then they can provide every homestead with electricity and then make them pay, you know, since it's all about greed. It's very, very, it's a greedy thing to have someone who lives in the rural areas buy um, a transformer when, say, they get their pension, right? That undermines their value as citizens and it subjugates them to remaining subjects of the king or the chiefs. Now, what this is not democracy. No one, the people, the community, don't get to vote about who their king is going to be or whatever. It's those elders that follow a lineage, and they end up picking who is the successor. So our democracy is half. We have half a democracy, and that's the truth. And that's why you had uh, we had struggle, the struggle kid movement, where they walked from Ovambaland all the way to the office. You know, I think they went to State House first, uh, the High Court first, and then the Swapo base. What they were doing is trying to appeal to the government to at least acknowledge their their dignity as citizens and as part of the nation. Now, I won't give them a lot of kudos because there were some criminals. I mean, there were guys who were creating legal roadblocks. There were guys that broke their friends out of prison and so forth and so forth. But the cry is legit. You get urbanization. You get urbanization because you don't put the infrastructure where it should be, which is in the villages. The infrastructure isn't there. So, in search for greener pastures, people migrate from the villages and so forth and come to the cities and the towns and so forth. And this has led to this boom of shanty houses, right? And the land, the land question about whose land is it? Is it this land? Who came first in Africa? Yada 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 and so forth. That argument of who owns the land, it's the government. Whether it's private property or whatever, it's the government. And a lot of time they don't assert their authority because some get bribed. Some don't want to be on the cover of a newspaper. The owners of some farms report harassment and abuse of power and so forth. So in the end, the government only owns the road, right? Which is quite sad. That the cooperation between the government and our commercial farmers is based on greed, money, greed, pure, pure greed, as opposed to cooperation. So there needs to be a forceful hand of um, applying pressure, but you cannot do it Zim style. That was completely wrong, right? But there are other methods that you can use to sort of force people that have 5 farms, 6 farms, and so forth to sell. These things are called sanctions, and they are also sometimes, let me say, or let me call it, let me talk to my sister quick. What's up? Sort of, yeah. Anyway, so boycotting, boycotting for the rights of those who are too fearful to stand up or to let their voice be heard, right? Boycotting. There are different methods in which this can be achieved. But the land question isn't really about farms, it's about housing. Now, when we speak of housing, we are speaking about people who went, studied, came back, and maybe they find a job in the city, or maybe they find a job where. But where is their home? Not house. Where is their home? Are they permanent residents? Or are they residents only when they have to be there? You understand? That's also something to be weighed in when it comes to people saying no, there should be no rent. That's why the rental, the rent, um, controlling the rent of renting out houses or buildings to people is going to be regulated so that the landlords don't abuse their power. And this whole crisis started with landlords that abused their power. They infuriated people to the extent that they said enough is enough. Keep your house. I'll go and build my shed elsewhere. That was the argument. And the second argument was, what about the promises that were made before independence? They are on record. They have been heard and they have been spread around. So meaning, mostly, let me use the struggle kids as an example, I apologize for this. So meaning the expectations that were set were not met at all because some people got too comfortable, right? And as time went on, as they grew older, it became much, much more frustrating economically in terms of dignity, human dignity, security, and just being recognized as a citizen in need. There was a speech that President Pohamba said. This is when he was interviewed by Al Jazeera. He said, if one Namibian is suffering, then we must all tend to help that one Namibian. If one, just one, is suffering, we must tend to help that one. But when the struggle kids were demonstrating and so forth, there wasn't any form of actual dialogue because you see in some countries, like countries that handle hostage situations, they have special divisions where they have people that can force even criminals to dialogue and, so that no one gets harmed. Now, the people that were present there did not have that capacity, and it all went into chaos, and it ended up with a young lady being killed by a stray bullet, right? So, when children become adults, no, please don't do this again, go. I'll talk to you later. I don't have that. I don't have that book. I only have my law books. I'm also writing. Hello. Yeah, for the moment it will go. So when they are old enough, or when they are met with people that can enlighten them as to what is the potential of Namibia and what is the output for the majority, this will obviously anger any person who has devoted their entire life to serving a party. This is what they did. They served the party during the liberation struggle and so forth. They did not, they have not crossed the bridge of serving the nation, of making it a national crisis as opposed to a SWAPO crisis. Because the nation body is the one that has more power and more resources that it can channel out to fix certain problems, to break certain cycles. For example, the cycle of war in Namibia has been broken. That is a win. And now we have our third democratically elected president. Third. So we've come a long way, but we've neglected the small things, like the dignity of someone who has to chop firewood for the fire so that they can make food. There are no stoves there. There's no power to power the stoves. And these people do when they get invited by, let's say, a family member in town that has a good job and has decided to settle there. What they see makes them feel inferior. And I think that is a very sad situation. Very well said. Right? The notion that the village should remain the village is narrow thinking. The village can be developed, and you have no better volunteers for projects than those people there, most of whom are unemployed. Most of them are very good at hard labor. So I'm talking about the holistic land issue. Alright, I touched on land, on rent. I touched on farms, and I touched on the communal, the areas. I touched on the red line. Alright, because I still view it as a sign of segregation. It's almost like that statue that they took down. And when we look at the fact that Namibia is clinging to the South African currency, it even gives me more discomfort in how we are um, what can I call it, dependent nation when we have independence, right? Now, there are people, the 31st of July, eventually the dialogue was reached and everything went as it should. But it once again, like it did when in Okahanja when um, the military police was called, it once again showed the reactory manner of the state. Now, this reactory manner was mostly due to those leaders who fought actual wars. You understand? So, brute force, they thought was the only language they could use. And I'm delighted that eventually there was dialogue and people came to a conclusion as to why there aren't any, why there were 50,000 people that applied and so forth, and um, why aren't they clearing land? Well, in Windhoek it's said to be 20,000. I don't know how much in Okahanja, and then other countries, other towns too. Let's not forget that. This is the I'm told is the start of providing people with service land, right? Um, but it also worries me in the sense that it doesn't worry me. It perplexes me. It's vexing. When last year, when President Pohamba declared the day of mourning for the people that have died from gender-based violence, as well as for the people that survived it. But as people were clearing land, there was not a day given where people can go and volunteer and clear land. You understand? So if it's a priority, make it a priority. Not everybody can afford the time, right? And a lot of rot is beginning to come out, and we knew this rot would come out eventually. So now the next towns that think that because they were not mentioned, the towns that were mentioned were Oshakati, Windhoek and Swakop. The other towns that were not mentioned should not be in their comfort zone. They should actually be starting to service land and to look for places where they can service land, because this is going to be a countrywide movement. Every town is going to be visited for land clearing. These were just the priorities because they are the ones with the highest populations, right? So, they should get out of their comfort zone. And the president, I think, Dr. Amin Agir, I think he made the remark where he said, just wait, soon they'll ask for money. I think that's completely wrong. They won't ask for money because if someone wants a plot and they want to build their house on it, why would they ask for money? When a house means security, when a house can be a home where children can grow up inside a house, fully electrified with running water, and again, the dignity not afforded to the people in the rural areas. Are they second-class citizens? It's a question. Are they second-class citizens? 25 years I have not seen development. Every time I go there, if there is development, it came out of those people's own pocket. It came out of their own pocket. And when you see how much, it's ridiculous. Let me say you live in, let me choose your parameter. You live somewhere far, right? And you don't have electricity, access to electricity, and all and all and all. And the municipality comes to you and says, well, my friend, we can give you electricity, but you have to buy this transformer. It's about 60, 70,000 that you have to pay. How many people can afford that? Let's be realistic, especially in the rural areas. Let's be realistic. Yes, they can loan from the bank. Yes, there are family members who can pitch in. But do they have to? When it's a national um, and the government priority to uplift their people. Because when electricity reaches the village sites provided by government, it will also lighten up a lot of people's eyes. They'll wake up. They'll wake up to the biggest surprise, and they will wake up to the fact that they are citizens and not just party members. The very first video I made, I said I was apolitical, which is how I like to think, or no, that I grew up apolitical. I did not grow up being indoctrinated with absolutely subjugating myself to a political party. Or a party member. I was not. You understand? So I don't have that mindset that any party owes me anything. I am looking and talking about the government. Yes, it's the SWAPO-led government, but it's still the government. And it's a crying shame that a developing country like us with so much resources cannot provide power to the villages. It's a damn shame. I applaud them because there's a running water now. Right? The water pipes are there. But people, like, we had to buy our own pipes, and we had to dig, the holes for the to place the pipes ourselves. And our pipe is connected to a neighbor. He's a great uncle of mine. This is in Marena, who then we pay for him allowing us to connect to his water pipeline system, right? So there is no regulation body in the rural areas. There is none. Apart from the kings and the chiefs who really look at the people, who expect the people to kneel before them. This is absolutely wrong. More than that, how about we keep the generation that is found with this top around tombo um, roundabout thing, keep them entertained with something else other than drinking alcohol, because with power comes a lot of things. With power comes a lot of platforms that become available to people. So I would employ, I hope you understand what I mean by employ. I'm not saying I'm going to employ. I'm saying I'm employing on the government to please make this a priority. Yes, we know about the Windhoek, now they're planning Windhoek, and there was a crisis there supposedly there. But what about the ones that literally have no voice? The ones in the north. And I'm speaking mostly about the east. Where is their development as citizens? Where is the encouragement from government, or more importantly, where is the assistance from government on building stronger, firmer homesteads? And most importantly, the government should be the one regulating the kings or the chiefs, because now they act independently and they do what they want. They take bribes, they give land to rich people who want it, and that is completely wrong. I was surprised when we were driving out from Marima, we took the other route. As we drove on about 20 kilometers, still in Kalango, I started to see fences, and they stretched on. Just fence, 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 fence. So there is a silent infiltration into the communal um, land. There is a silent, very, very silent, very, very subtle movement into those areas because they are rich in grass, they are rich in vegetation, the soil is rich. And the next thing you know, everybody would be caught off guard. The government would be caught off guard because it's so easy to manipulate the kings and chiefs. Why is it easy to manipulate them? I'm not saying because they don't have their people's um, needs at heart, but somehow they truly need the money. They truly need that money. So I'm hoping that the government looks into this and that it sees what's going on there. That slow um, movement into the communal areas, as well as find out who gave the go ahead. I'm not in a row or fight against traditional leaders, but I won't pretend that I'm a fan of tradition. I have no problem with culture. Culture changes, culture, most people mix tradition with, they mix tradition with culture, which isn't the case. Tradition is an oppressor. It's non-progressive. It's stale water, right? While culture is a flowing river. There's a big difference. So tradition, just like Nelson Mandela said, we should kill off tradition. We should. Because by making tradition obsolete, we also don't have the gatherings where the chiefs and kings gather their people and have political dialogue with them, convincing them sometimes of things that are not true. Right? It's completely false. As well as to show our citizens where the government is, or the fact that there is a government now. We have a government now. And if anything, the AR demonstration, the way it was done, everything ingenious. It worked right as it should. And it showed that when enough people come together, they can march together, that they can make a difference. They can push the unpushable government. But the people in the rural areas are not aware of this. And the problem that I have also is most scholars, most graduates here, they also um, they are also sort of at the altar of tradition. And they go, I can't wait to go back home, mango, what, and all of that stuff. Let me tell you, you find that people are happy to see you. They are not happy with life. Understand that. Maybe they won't say it, but in most cases that's the case. So we have to transform our people's way of thinking by giving them what they don't know they need. Most people don't know they need it. Only some know they need it. But this is something that they need. And it will also bring about a more inclusive government that can monitor the country as a whole in terms of service, providing services and kicking out corruption. Alright, so please look into this and let's help our people. Let's show everybody that they matter because everybody matters. None are more important than others. The pressure that was given by AR was also a demonstration to everybody in the country that they can have dialogue with the nation if they use the proper channels, if they think ahead, almost obsessively think ahead, stand firm, stand fast, not silenced, not intimidated. Then we can transform Namibia. This is a developing country, and there are lots of potentials for business, especially in the rural areas, for entrepreneurs. There are lots of opportunities which are hindered by the lack of power. Power as in electricity, as in light, as in turning on a saw machine or whatever. Let's not make some special, others not. That is involuntary discrimination. Our vision, the Vision 2030 or whatever they call it, that vision, that date was set because most people, it's called the Millennium Challenge. It was set by the UN. They actually did not believe that Africa would be able to do it. Would be able to do it ahead of time, or that Namibia, or that Africans, right, or that Africans would actually abandon some of those principles, fine-tuning to fit their country. So the Millennium Challenge is until 2030. But the work that can be done, the change that can come, the change that should come, doesn't have to take that long. I firmly believe that that deadline will be absolutely demolished, especially by Namibia. But I'm also disheartened by the level of tribalism, especially Ambo and Damaras. Damaras are trying to show, Hagi is a Damara, he's ours, he has to help us. Ambo are saying Swapo is our party, we went, we fought, and so forth and so forth. That should stop. It's ridiculous. When you have so much pride in your tradition, you become blind to a lot of other suffering. So black, white, brown, whatever language, we need to bring about change, even if it's enforced. Because the next generation that inherit it won't complain, right? So please, I implore the government to look into this, because this is their biggest project, a project that they should have finished a long time ago. Alright? We don't want only the lucky ones to be the ones that make it in life. We want to give everybody equal opportunity. But right now, the scale is imbalanced. And we need to bring that sync, that harmony. Salute.